Hello, you are watching the Supply Chain Digital Show brought to you by Supply Chain Digital Magazine, Procurement Magazine, and BizClick Media Group. So we're a few seconds late. We had a few gremlins in the system, but everything's fine now. My name is Sean Ashcroft. I'm editor of Supply Chain Digital. In this show, we bring you all the latest news, analysis, and opinion from the world of supply chain every 2 weeks, right here on LinkedIn, YouTube, and other digital platforms. If you're wondering where our usual host Scott is, he's otherwise engaged today. So I've stepped in to his brogues to present today's show. But I'm delighted to say that joining us, as usual, is Procurement Magazine editor, Georgia Wilson. Hi, Georgia. How are you today?
Hi, Sean. I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, very well. Now, just a quick reminder at this point for all of you watching, please do say hello by posting in the comments section underneath the show. And also do vote in our LinkedIn poll. On which note, Georgia, what is our poll this week?
Yeah, so this week the LinkedIn poll is which is likeliest to slow the Great Resignation. So the choices were better pay, better conditions, upskilling, or hybrid working. So Sean, what are your thoughts on the poll? What are your predictions?
Well, it's a tough one, really, because you speak to different people and they have different views on this. Anybody in supply chain, with digital transformation, the big thing is upskilling, because they need the people with the skills to be able to carry out that work. But then in other industries, of course, better pay and better conditions are more important. Thinking maybe like warehouses and haulage drivers, areas where supply chain's struggling. But I mean, this affecting all areas of society and business, I think, isn't it, really? So I guess it depends who's answering the questions, probably. But so we'll be sharing the results of that poll anyway at the end of the show. But there's loads to talk about before then.
Cool.
And sorry, Georgia.
No, you're fine. I was just going to say, should we start by having a look at some of the latest news from supply chain and procurement? Do you want?
Yeah, I'll kick us off with that, Georgia. So one story that really grabbed my attention this week was a piece I wrote on the Great Resignation, as we were just talking about in the poll there, and it's how the global food supply chains are really struggling because they can't find the labour, to keep things ticking over. This is based on a Deloitte report on basically saying that food supply chains are pretty much broken in many instances. Crops, being left to rot in fields for want of people to harvest them. We have food processing plants that are either scaling back or shutting down because, again, staff shortages. I mean, in Canada alone, poultry farmers have cut output year on year by over 12%. Supermarkets are understaffed and their shelves are looking a bit bare in places because of supply problems. And in the UK this week, the government highlighted just how bad the labour shortages in the food sector are. 1 in 5 food delivery orders is not being filled on time. And the labour crisis in the food industry is threatening food sector revenues by up to 20%. So it's a really serious problem, and there are no easy solutions.
Cool, thanks, Sean. So what's your second story for today?
Yeah, well, second story, Georgia, is it's a McKinsey, based on a McKinsey piece, that prolific creator of business content. McKinsey is urging shipping or firms, who have to ship their products around the world to get creative, to get around the sort of sea freight congestion and inflation charges. Um, Now, among the points of advice that McKinsey is giving is for shippers to avoid high spot prices being charged by freight forwarders and ocean carriers by deferring or cancelling shipments for lower value goods. They're urging shippers to cultivate new suppliers by nearshoring or reshoring, and also using suppliers from India, South America, so that they're not so reliant on the super expensive and super congested Trans-Pacific trade line. And they're also encouraging manufacturers to rethink product design, because highly customizable and complex components are exactly the kind of things that are being held up by supply chains. So that's from McKinsey, to companies all over the world. And what about procurement, Georgia? What's been happening there the last couple of weeks that's caught your eye?
Yeah, so one of the things I've seen recently was some interesting insights from GSK, and their senior sustainability manager Tom Newbigging. So during World Sustainable Procurement Day this year, he discussed their efforts to achieve their net zero goals, and so part of their efforts included like a 5-step procurement plan that others could use to enable to enable their achievement of these goals, and they're often using technology to really drive it. So the 5 steps included effective data gathering, specifying an engagement strategy with suppliers, ensuring that all available opportunities are understood by those in the company, and then acting on those opportunities, and then using data to set specific targets.
Yeah, well, that's really fascinating. But and what was your second news story that you wanted to share, Georgia?
Yeah, so other interesting insights that I came across this week have come from Softco, a financial process automation company for P2P. So the company emphasised the need to modernise procurement, in stating that without moving, to modern procurement, procure to pay software, the processes are time consuming, cause errors, and could often often provide very little insight into the processes. So the company also outlined 4 ways that organisations can modernise their procurement, to help alleviate some of these challenges. And those included digitalising supplier relationship management processes, automating time-consuming tasks, standardizing and automating purchasing compliance processes, and investing in procurement technology that enhances visibility.
Yeah, one way or another, everything always seems to come down to technology, doesn't it? With these stories, so many of them are, everything that these companies are talking about is based in tech and what tech can bring to supply and procurement. Now, remember, you can catch all the latest news and analysis on our websites. That's supplychaindigital.com and procurementmag.com.
Yeah, so still to come after the break, we'll be taking a closer look at our brand new April issue of Supply Chain Digital, and also continue to explore the March issue of our bi-monthly publication, Procurement Magazine. We'll also be looking ahead to Procurement and Supply Chain Live, which will be taking place in London this month.
But first, before all that, we are delighted to be joined now by Julia Salant, who is Head of Sustainability Innovation for EcoVadis. EcoVadis is a world leader in providing trusted business sustainability ratings. So welcome, Julia. Really nice to have you on the show.
Hello, Sean. Hi, Georgia. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me today. I'm
No,
absolutely
you're
thrilled to join the team.
very welcome. Thank you for your time,
Of
Julia.
course.
Um, now, Georgia and myself have just been chatting about some of the news that has caught our attention over the past couple of weeks. And, as ever, there's, uh, sustainability
Hmm.
issues in there. And so I'd like to maybe just ask you as an opener, Julia, with sustainability now being so crucial for virtually everything businesses do, but particularly in, the scope three emissions in supply chains, as we all know, is a massive issue.
Yeah.
In that context, why are sustainability ratings so important?
Absolutely. Thank you for asking this question, Sean. Ultimately, it does look like sustainability in the last decade became the fourth dimension of procurement decision making alongside price and quality and service. And it's becoming really, really critical because scope three emissions management generally. GHG emissions management, climate action by large corporates will be defined by the degree to which their procurement teams can implement and embed supplier decarbonization programs. So ultimately, with scope three emissions, like everything else that's related to procurement, a lot of the impacts are happening outside of the four walls of the organization. This is why it's extremely important to embed sustainability into the procurement process in a way that is meaningful, that is close to the business activities, and that is continuous. Because ultimately, what we're seeing, really successful sustainable procurement programs, they really enable this bridge between buyers and suppliers and embed sustainability into the fabric of their relationship.
So if I could jump in with a question,
Sure,
Sean, if you don't mind,
of course.
what do businesses have to do exactly to earn
Mhm.
an EcoVadis rating?
Of course. Well, EcoVadis rating has been around for the last 15 years, and it's been really exciting to see the adoption and the growth of our network. Today, we have 90,000 suppliers all over the world that are leveraging EcoVadis scorecards to share their sustainability practices with their buyers. What does it need? What does it require? Ultimately, it's a process that requires data collection and showcasing the management system which the suppliers implement internally on around sustainability. What this means in practice, it's responding to questions that are customized based on the activity and geography in which suppliers operate, and also calibrated by size. So the idea of putting evidence to what you say that you're doing, and the Covadis team of experts looking at these evidence and then sharing scorecards that are calibrated based on the activity of the supplier. So that's the kind of the big picture on what is the what the process requires of companies to do. But it's much more than that. As you know, with sustainability, it's really about how do you leverage the output, how do you leverage the impacts that you have within your own organization and outside of it, and tell your sustainability story to your business partners.
I mean, Julia, everybody talks about scope three emissions, don't they?
Hmm. Yeah, they do.
And they are undeniably hugely important. Given that the it's estimated that 80% of a
Hmm.
company's carbon emissions will be through their supply chain in the shape of scope three emissions. But it's funny in a way, isn't it? Because ultimately, it's not about scope three as such. Because if every single
Yeah.
company took responsibility for their scope one and two emissions, then scope three emissions would take care of themselves, wouldn't they? And
Well, that's a really great way of looking at it. Yeah, Sean, I think partly it will solve the problem, but I think it's really a good example of the interconnectedness of everything that we do within, and regardless of your company's location along the value chain, your actions within your four walls impact everyone else's actions. And I think we've experienced that a lot during the pandemic, the current unfolding crisis that is happening in Ukraine. We're really seeing the impacts on the global supply chain, which reinforce this interconnectedness. But I also want to share a little bit, scope 3. I'm really happy we're talking about scope 3. It wasn't part of the global conversation around sustainability just a couple of years ago. And I'm happy that we're all kind of educating ourselves and starting to learn more and more about the implications of scope 3 management and what it means for organizations. It's one of the biggest challenges that is facing today, both the procurement and sustainability teams. And
Sure, it's a massive thing, isn't it? And what are the biggest challenges on that front, finally,
Mhm.
Julia?
Of course, I think there are three key challenges that we see with our customers every single day. One is visibility. It's really about having difficulties understanding how your suppliers are performing and how other aspects of scope 3. There are 15 categories of scope 3. Suppliers have an impact on 2 3 categories. The rest are linked to other activities in the value chain of the company, so it's important to note. So it's really about having visibility on the full scope 3, which today I'm really happy to see the growth of a lot of the quantification tools, as well as the greater expertise that companies are harnessing. So this level of visibility is the first challenge that companies are struggling with, but are starting to make progress on. The second level that we see is really about maturity. There is a huge maturity gap that we see between the leaders in the industry on sustainability. Usually, those are the companies that are more customer facing, and then, SMEs within the value chain, and even companies that are large but are not publicly listed, for example, or not customer facing. They have a little bit of a lower maturity and less of a pressure, historically have had less of a pressure to address scope 3 emissions and general sustainability. So we see this maturity gap, that there is a need of taking these first steps and taking everyone on this journey, but it really takes time to get there.
Yeah, it's going to be a very long journey, isn't it? I think everybody uh, accepts that fact. And
Mhm.
but thank you ever so much for joining us today,
Of
Julia.
course.
It's really fascinating getting your insights on this crucially important area. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. It's my pleasure.
Um, so it's great to have Julia joining us live on the show there. We've got lots more great content to share with you after this short break, so don't go away.
To get people interested to work in sourcing, that would be my main message. My name is Åsa Stoje, and I work as Head of Sourcing and Procurement at Econom Bank. Econom Bank creates possibilities for better living by offering simple, fair and affordable services, enabling a healthy economy for the many people. The sourcing process is a fundament that goes through the whole company. Nothing can be bought or purchased without sourcing involvement. Sourcing is an engine for growth and increased profitability. We have good knowledge in so many different areas, so I think we add value to the organization in many different areas. We have a lot of partners within the bank. They are experts within their field, and together we can grow, expand, develop and build scale. It's fantastic to be part of this journey, and this will also require sourcing to adopt and be able to respond, support and advise the business in the right way and in the right direction.
Fundamentally, data is a critical enabler for transformational technologies like artificial intelligence. Arnold Yamanog, CTO of Tealbook. We are heavily focused on the procurement space, and procurement is a subset of supply chains. We are one of the very few companies using advanced machine learning techniques, as well as highly proprietary and creative engineering methods to autonomously ingest supplier information. A lot of the decisions that we make from a technology roadmap is rooted in data quality. And both our supplier base that we work with and who we take that information or use that information from, and then who we give it to, can rely on it and trust it. And then being able to insert that data to the client's technology systems in an automated fashion as well. For clients who really want to understand supply chain risk, who really don't have the level of visibility that they're seeking in the supply chain, I think Tealbook can be a real player, a significant player in providing that kind of insight.
Welcome back. Now, still to come, we have the results of our LinkedIn poll and more on the procurement and supply chain live events. But first, let's just say hello to some of our viewers who have been good enough to join us today. And we've got some people making some really insightful comments here. We've got Jason T. Hopkins. It doesn't say where he's from, talking about how technology and education is super important for young people these days in the workplace. Again, sort of ties into the Great Resignation. And we have Facundo Monti. I'm not sure where Facundo's from. It doesn't say. And we also have Paul M, who says, great content so far. I'm on the train to London. So glad to keep you company while you're journeying there, Paul. But let's just take a look at the latest issues of the magazine. Now, I'll kick this one off, Georgia, by looking at the April issue of Supply Chain. I'm going to start with a feature that I wrote on the use of electronic trucks in the field of logistics. Now, again, sort of feeds into what we were talking about with Julia from EcoVadis earlier. These companies are driving to, push their net zero targets forward, and in logistics, a big part of that is going to be using fleet vehicles that run on renewable energy sources. Now, I spoke to, on the logistics side, I spoke to DFDS, which is based in Denmark. It's Northern Europe's largest shipping and logistics company. It's one of the top buyers of e-vehicles. It bought 25 Volvo e-trucks in December 2021 alone. And I interviewed Nicholas Anderson, who's the company's executive VP and head of logistics division. Now, he said, although the company is determined to hit its 2050 net zero target, and it plans to be using only trucks that run on sustainable energy by then, one of the problems it faces is just a lack of infrastructure around green energy, in particular charging points for battery-powered vehicles, and also filling points for green hydrogen for trucks and vehicles that run on fuel cells. And I also spoke with Daimler Truck, which is one of the world's largest manufacturers of commercial vehicles. Now, Daimler Truck's head of e-mobility, Rakesh Naja, told me that the company's plans is to be carbon neutral by 2039. And part of that is to only sell trucks that are going to be running on sustainable fuel. But in a similar way, to the logistics companies who are buying these trucks, Daimler recognizes that it's a lack of infrastructure that is sort of undermining the uptake of these trucks at the moment. And Rakesh from Daimler Truck says that it's a huge problem, especially for long haul logistics, for obvious reasons. And he says that the way ahead is collaboration between logistics stakeholders and local and national governments.
Oh, that all sounds really interesting, Sean. It's be interesting to see how like the industry tackles these challenges and the infrastructure evolves when it in terms of the charging points and that kind of thing. So what was your second pick for April?
Yeah, second feature, Georgia, is an interview I conducted with Glenn Steinberg, who is EY's global supply chain leader. Very influential character in the world of supply chain. I mean, at policy level, talking sort of at the Senate level, really, he's got the ears of the decision makers and policy makers. Now, Glenn was just sharing some insight into exactly how his EY colleagues are building the next generation of supply chains. And again, it's one of those, sci-fi glimpses that you get into what the future might look like. And Glenn makes the point that, if it's possible now to have self-driving cars, where effectively people's lives are at stake, where technology is holding people's lives in its hands or in its motherboards, then surely it must be possible to have an autonomous and self-organizing supply chain that is driven by tech, that kind of runs automatically almost in the background. I mean, it's quite something really, when you think about it. And he's really only sort of looking 5-10 years ahead, I think.
Yeah, like you say, it sounds really interesting and does sound something very futuristic, and definitely one to keep an eye on.
It certainly is. And so, Georgia, what's caught your attention from the latest issue of Procurement magazine?
Yeah, so from our March issue of Procurement magazine, I've picked the big picture this week. So in this section, we looked at how procurement could be the solution to Scope 3 challenges. So ways in which it could do that is by improving primary data availability and quality, harnessing high quality secondary data, and focusing on emissions hotspots in the supply chain.
Back to Scope 3 again.
Yeah,
it's just everywhere, isn't it?
Yeah, it seems to be a big theme, a recurring theme at the moment.
Yeah, and I think it will continue to be so.
Definitely.
So we've got tons of great interviews and features in both of these issues. So make sure you visit the websites for both Supply Chain Digital and Procurement magazine, where you can read the magazines and watch all of the video content too. Lots of embedded video content in both magazines. And I'll tell you what, why don't we just take a quick look at the result of the poll. Now, what have we got here then? So remind us, Georgia, what was the poll question?
Yeah, so the poll question was, which is likeliest to slow the Great Resignation? So the options were better pay, better conditions, upskilling, and hybrid working.
So what we have as a result is three of those options actually neck and neck. Better pay, 33%, hybrid working, 30%, better conditions, 28%, upskilling, sort of quite a way back on 9%. So I guess, better pay, better conditions might be answers that people who work in, I don't know, the food sector, for example, haulage, last mile, those kind of areas, that's what those companies are going to have to do to attract and retain labor, isn't it? Upskilling, I guess, maybe that is more for the technical workers who are facing, evolving challenges at work, with digital transformation and stuff. That's quite an interesting result there.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, from those results, it seems to be that it's probably going to be a mixture of things, of a little bit of each that is going to sort of maybe solve the problem.
Yeah, I think so. And of course, it comes down to more than just 4 things. There are so many factors involved in this, aren't there?
Definitely, yeah.
But so that's our poll for this week. So if you just bear with me for a second. Well, that's more or less all we've got time for this week. So thank you for interacting with us if you were watching live, and for taking part in the poll. And remember, this show is available to watch on demand. So please do share it with colleagues and anyone else interested in supply chain and procurement. So thank you to Georgia and to our special guest, Julia Salant, who is Head of Sustainability Innovation for EcoVadis. And thanks to Kieran and Ernie and the rest of the video production team, Justin and the design team for the great looking magazines, and to Kaylee and the marketing team. This has been a BizClick Media Group production, and we will see you next time.